I'm sitting by the phone that never rings anymore, and I'm wearing my turquoise blouse, the one I save for special days. Except today isn't special. Today is just another day I'm waiting for a call that won't come. You know what I mean? That feeling when you've been married 32 years and suddenly you're the one he's making excuses to. He said he was paying the bills and I believed him. God, I hate saying that out loud. But I did. I actually believed that every late night, every weekend away, every time he came home smelling like someone else's perfume was all about keeping the lights on in this old Victorian house we've lived in for 20 years. The house. It's divided into apartments now, creaky stairs and all. My mother left it to me, and I was so proud of that inheritance. I mean, I really was. But looking back, I was such a fool for thinking he cared about maintaining it, about our future here. He was already planning his escape. The leaves are falling outside right now, turning gold in the afternoon light, and all I can think is how much I love autumn in Cleveland, how much I love this old town with its main street, and the diner where everyone knows your name. Or they used to. I'm not sure they want to know me anymore. I'm pulling the crocheted blanket, the one my grandmother made, over my lap, and I'm trying to remember when I stopped asking questions. Was it when I gave up my job at the library? That was God? That was 15 years ago. He said we needed me home more, that managing the apartment building would keep me busy enough. But really, he just wanted me isolated, you know? Keeping me here while he built his other life. I had dreams back then. I was going to teach, maybe get into archival work. I collected recipes from magazines, thought someday I'd write my own cookbook, but that felt silly after a while. Selfish even. My duty was to him, to us, to maintaining this family. And if this story touches you, if you felt even a fraction of what I'm about to tell you, please consider hitting that like button. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Because I'm not the only one who's been through this, and maybe my voice can help someone else find theirs. Subscribe so this reaches the people who need it most. The belief I held onto was so strong. I mean, loyalty was everything to me. Family unity. Keeping things together no matter what. That's what I was taught, what I believed in my heart. So when he came home late, I made him ham hocks simmering with green beans, his favorite. When he forgot our anniversary, I told myself he was stressed about money. When he started being cruel with his words, really cutting me down, I thought, well, maybe I deserve it. Maybe I'm not doing enough. I'd look at that picture of the Last Supper on the dining room wall and think about sacrifice and suffering. I thought I was being righteous. My morning routine was exhausting. I'd wake up at 5:30, make coffee, check the building's maintenance requests, answer tenant calls, and somehow still have breakfast ready for him by 7. He'd barely look at me. Just grunt, grab his plate, scroll through his phone. When I'd try to talk about our day, about us, he'd wave me off. I'm working, he'd say. Someone has to keep this place running. As if I wasn't doing anything. As if managing 4 apartment units, dealing with repairs, collecting rent, keeping the books wasn't work. And then came the text. It was a Tuesday morning in early October, leaves crunching under my feet as I walked to the mailbox. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. Is this Mrs. Harrison? We need to talk about your husband. My stomach dropped. I stood there on the sidewalk, watching the wind scatter orange and red leaves across the lawn, feeling the world tilt. I didn't respond. I went back inside, climbed those creaky stairs to our apartment, and sat in the living room. The crocheted blanket was draped over the sofa arm like always, and I reached out to touch it, needing something solid, something real. My grandmother made that blanket. She'd survived her own bad marriage, come out the other side stronger. I wondered if she'd ever felt this hollow. That evening when he came home, I didn't say anything. I just watched him. Really looked at him for the first time in years. The way he moved through our home like it was temporary. The way he never touched anything of mine, never asked about my day, never seemed to see me at all. I was furniture, a fixture, something that came with the property. I gave up everything for this marriage. Everything. When I was 43, I had a chance to go back to school, get my master's in library science. There was a scholarship program, full funding, everything I'd ever wanted. But he said no. He said we couldn't afford for me to be away that much, that the apartments needed me, that he needed me. So I stayed. I let that dream die quietly, like so many others. I used to paint, watercolors mostly, small landscapes, nothing fancy. I had a little corner in what's now the storage room where I'd set up my easel. But he complained about the smell of the paint, about the mess, about how I was wasting time when there was always something that needed doing. So I packed it all away. Haven't touched a brush in 12 years. My sister used to invite me to her house for Sunday dinners. Big family gatherings. Cousins and nieces and nephews running around. I loved those days. But he'd always have an excuse why we couldn't go. Too tired. Too much work. Didn't feel like driving. After a while, the invitations stopped coming. She told me later she thought I didn't want to see them anymore. That hurt more than anything. The recipes I collected became my only creative outlet. I'd sit at the kitchen table after he went to bed, flipping through magazines, carefully cutting out recipes and pasting them into notebooks. I had dozens of them. Recipes I'd never make because he only wanted the same 5 meals on rotation. But I kept collecting them anyway, kept dreaming of elaborate dinner parties I'd never host, of cooking for people who'd actually appreciate it. My faith was supposed to sustain me through all of this. I'd pray in the morning, looking at that picture of the Last Supper, asking God to help me be a better wife, a more patient person, more understanding. I thought suffering was holy. I thought if I just endured long enough, loved hard enough, sacrificed enough, things would get better. That's what I was taught. That's what I believed. But they never got better. They got worse. So slowly I barely noticed until suddenly I was drowning. The cutting remarks started maybe 10 years ago. Little things at first. "You're wearing that?" when I'd put on something I liked. "Can't you do anything right?" when dinner wasn't exactly how he wanted it. "God, you're so needy," when I asked if he wanted to watch a movie together. Each comment was small, but they accumulated like snow, until I was buried under the weight of his contempt. He'd go silent on me for days, just wouldn't speak. I'd ask him questions, and he'd look right through me like I didn't exist. I started wondering if I'd done something wrong, started apologizing for things I couldn't even name. "I'm sorry," I'd say. "Whatever I did, I'm sorry." And he'd just shake his head like I was pathetic. The money thing started subtly, too. He'd always handled the finances, said it was easier that way, that I didn't need to worry about it. But then I'd notice things. The property taxes on the building hadn't been paid. The insurance had lapsed. When I asked about it, he'd get angry. "I'm taking care of it," he'd snap. "Don't you trust me?" So I'd back off, feeling guilty for questioning him. My mother left me this house when she died 8 years ago. It was worth maybe $300,000 then, in decent shape, good rental income from the apartments. She wanted me to have security, to have something that was mine. I cried when I got the deed, felt so grateful, so blessed. I thought we'd fix it up together, make it beautiful, build our future here. Instead, he convinced me to take out a home equity loan. Said we needed to renovate the apartments, upgrade them, increase the rent. The loan was for $100,000. I signed the papers because I trusted him, because he said it was an investment in our future. The renovations never happened. Not really. He'd hire contractors who'd start work and then disappear. He'd buy materials that never got used. The money just vanished, and when I asked where it went, he'd show me receipts, invoices, bills. "See," he'd say, "it's all going to the house. Stop questioning everything." But the apartments looked the same. The tenants were still complaining about the same problems. Nothing was actually getting fixed, and we now owed the bank $100,000 plus interest. I started having panic attacks. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, heart racing, unable to breathe. I'd go downstairs and sit in the dark living room, pulling that crocheted blanket around my shoulders, trying to calm down. The doctor gave me pills for anxiety, but they just made me feel numb. The real problem wasn't chemical. The real problem was my life. There were good days, though, or at least days I convinced myself were good. Days when he'd smile at me, or compliment something I cooked, or mention a memory from when we first met. I'd cling to those moments like they proved something. Like they meant the bad times were just temporary rough patches and not the entire foundation of our marriage crumbling beneath my feet. I remember one Saturday in early September, before everything fell apart. He was in a good mood, almost giddy. Said he'd made a big sale at work that we should celebrate. We drove out to this little diner on the edge of town, the one with the red vinyl booths and the waitress who always remembers your order. We sat across from each other, and for just an hour it felt like old times. He held my hand across the table, asked me how I was doing, actually listened when I talked about maybe volunteering at the library again. I went home thinking maybe we'd turned a corner. Maybe things would be okay. 2 days later, I found the credit card statement he'd left on the kitchen counter. 3 charges at a jewelry store I'd never heard of. Total, $4,000. I'd never received jewelry. Not for our anniversary, not for my birthday, not for Christmas. So who had? That's when the text message made sense. That's when I knew. But even then, I didn't confront him. I put the statement back where I found it, made dinner, acted normal. Because I didn't know what else to do. Because the thought of facing the truth was more terrifying than living in the lie. The health crisis came 3 weeks later. I was carrying laundry up those creaky stairs, arms full of towels and sheets, when the room started spinning. I remember thinking, I just need to sit down for a second. I made it to the landing before everything went dark. I woke up on the floor, unsure how much time had passed. My head was throbbing. My vision was blurry. I managed to crawl to the phone and call 911, and I remember thinking how pathetic that was, that I was calling strangers for help because the person who was supposed to love me wasn't even home. The paramedics found me conscious but disoriented. Blood pressure through the roof, they said. Dangerously high. Had I been under stress? Yes. Was I taking care of myself? Not really. Did I feel safe at home? That question broke something in me. I started crying and couldn't stop. At the hospital, they kept me overnight for observation, ran tests. A doctor, this kind woman maybe in her 40s, sat on the edge of my bed and asked me questions that nobody had asked me in years. Who takes care of you? She wanted to know. When was the last time you did something just for yourself? Are you in a situation that's causing you harm? I couldn't answer her. I just cried harder. The night in that hospital room was the longest of my life. I lay there in the dark, listening to the beeping monitors, the squeaking shoes of nurses passing in the hallway, the distant sound of someone else's television playing through the walls. The fluorescent lights in the corridor cast this greenish glow through the door window, and I watched shadows move across the ceiling, feeling like I was underwater, drowning slowly, and nobody could see it happening. Around 3 a.m, I got up to use the bathroom, caught my reflection in the mirror above the sink, and barely recognized myself. When had I gotten so thin? When had my face taken on that hollow look, those dark circles under my eyes? My hair needed cutting, had needed it for months, but he'd complained about the expense. You look fine, he'd said. Why do you need to spend money on something so vain? I stood there looking at this stranger in the mirror and thought about my mother. She'd been so vibrant, so alive. Even in her 60s, she'd had this energy about her, this spark. She wore red lipstick and took dance classes and laughed loud enough that you could hear her from across a room. When she left me the house, she told me, "This is your security, baby. Nobody can take this from you. This is yours." But I'd let him take it anyway. I'd signed it over piece by piece, believing his promises, trusting his plans. A nurse came in around dawn to check my vitals. She was older, maybe close to retirement, with kind eyes and gentle hands. She adjusted my IV and asked how I was feeling, really feeling. And something about the way she asked made me tell her the truth. "I don't know how I got here," I said. "I don't know how my life became this." She pulled up a chair and sat down. "Honey, I've been a nurse for 37 years. I've seen a lot of women come through here with stress-related conditions, high blood pressure, heart palpitations, anxiety attacks. You know what most of them have in common?" She waited. "They're all carrying weight that isn't theirs to carry." "I made vows," I said, "for better or worse." "Worse isn't supposed to kill you," she said simply. "That's not love. That's not marriage. That's just dying slowly while telling yourself it's noble." Her words stayed with me long after she left the room. He showed up the next morning, annoyed that he'd had to rearrange his schedule. Didn't ask how I was feeling. Just wanted to know when I could come home because he needed me to deal with a tenant complaint. The doctor saw the whole interaction, and after he left, she closed the door and said something I'll never forget. "Honey, your body is trying to tell you something. Are you going to listen?" They discharged me with medications and instructions to reduce stress. Reduce stress. Like it was that simple. Like I could just decide to stop living the life I was trapped in. But something had shifted. Maybe it was the collapse itself, the way my body had literally given out under the weight of everything I was carrying. Maybe it was that doctor's question. Maybe it was just that I'd finally hit bottom and the only way left was up. I started looking at things differently, really seeing them. I noticed how he never asked about my hospital stay, never followed up on my medications, never offered to help with anything so I could rest. I noticed how he'd started coming home later and later, sometimes not until 2 or 3 in the morning. I noticed how he'd started dressing better, cologne every day, new clothes I'd never seen him buy. And I noticed the money, or the lack of it. One afternoon when he was out, I went through our files, all the documents, all the accounts, everything. I made myself a cup of coffee, sat at the dining room table under that picture of the Last Supper, and started calculating. The house my mother left me, $300,000 value. The home equity loan he'd taken out, $100,000 borrowed. Renovations completed, maybe $10,000 worth, if that. Where did the other $90,000 go? My savings from before we married, $43,000. I'd been so proud of that nest egg. Money I'd saved working at the library for 15 years. It was in a joint account. Current balance, $600. My inheritance from my grandmother, $22,000. Money she'd left specifically for me to do something special with. Gone. Every penny. The rental income from the apartments, roughly $4,000 a month. Our mortgage and expenses, maybe $2,000. Where was the other $2,000 going every month for the past 8 years? That was nearly $200,000. Unaccounted for. I sat there with my calculator, watching the numbers add up, feeling sick. I'd contributed over $500,000 to this marriage through my inheritance, my savings, the property I'd been left, the income I generated, and I had nothing to show for it. Worse than nothing. I was in debt. The deeper I dug, the worse it got. I found credit cards I didn't know existed, all in my name. He'd opened them using my social security number, my information, without ever telling me. 5 cards, total balance, $67,000. Charges for restaurants I'd never been to, hotels I'd never stayed in, stores I'd never shopped at. He'd been living a completely separate life on my credit, destroying my financial future while telling me he was paying the bills. I found loan documents for a boat. A boat. We lived in Cleveland. We didn't go boating. But there it was. A loan for $35,000, signed 2 years ago, with me listed as co-borrower. I'd never seen the boat, didn't know where it was docked, didn't even know it existed. But I was legally responsible for it. I found receipts for a storage unit I'd never heard of, monthly payments for 3 years. What was in there? His other life? Evidence of more lies? I didn't even want to know. But the worst discovery came when I looked at the property tax records online. The house, my mother's house, the inheritance that was supposed to be my security, had a lien on it, not from the bank, from the IRS. He hadn't been paying our income taxes, hadn't filed returns in 3 years. We owed the government $48,000, and they'd placed a lien on my property to secure it. My mother's house, the one thing she'd wanted me to have, the one piece of security she'd left me. He'd put it at risk without telling me, without even filing the paperwork that might have prevented this. I sat at that dining room table for 5 hours, going through every document, every statement, every piece of paper. I made lists. I calculated totals. I traced where money had come from and where it had gone. And when I was done, I understood something clearly. This wasn't just neglect. This wasn't just poor money management. This was deliberate. This was theft. He'd systematically taken everything I had, everything I'd earned, everything I'd been given, and he'd used it to fund a life I wasn't part of. He'd stolen from me while looking me in the eye and telling me he was taking care of things. He'd destroyed my credit, my finances, my future, while positioning himself as the responsible one, the one who handled the bills, the one I should be grateful to. And what had he contributed? What had he actually paid for with his so-called bill paying? I made a list of everything he'd told me he was handling. The property taxes, never paid them. I found the delinquency notices buried in a drawer, the insurance, lapsed, the utilities. I'd been paying those from the rental account for years without realizing it. His business expenses. What business? He worked for someone else. The car payment on the brand new Cadillac Escalade he'd bought 6 months ago. Midnight black, beautiful thing. $70,000. I'd never even sat in it. He said it was for work, that he needed to look professional. Now, I wondered who else had sat in that passenger seat. The math was damning. The math was undeniable. For 32 years, I'd been financing his life while he told me he was paying the bills. For 32 years, I'd believed the lie because I wanted to believe it, because my entire identity was built on being loyal, being a good wife, keeping the family together no matter what. But there was no family. There was just me, giving everything, and him taking it all. That's when my phone rang. Unknown number again. This time I answered. Mrs. Harrison? This is Diane Carmichael. I was married to your husband before you were. Her voice was steady, matter of fact. I know this is strange, but I need to warn you about something. I should have hung up. That's what the old me would have done. But the new me, the one who just spent 3 hours doing math and facing the truth, stayed on the line. He's seeing someone, she said. Her name is Jessica. She's 28. He's been with her for about 2 years. I know because she reached out to me, trying to figure out who I was and why he kept mentioning an ex-wife who took all his money. She laughed, bitter. Sound familiar? It did. God, it did. He told her the same thing he told you, I'm sure, that he's paying bills, that he's supporting his wife who can't take care of herself, that he's trapped in a loveless marriage but can't leave because of money or loyalty or whatever excuse makes him sound noble instead of cruel. She paused. He did the exact same thing to me, took everything I had and blamed me for it. I was stupid enough to believe him for 16 years. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because she's pregnant, Diane said, and he's telling her he's leaving you to be with her. He's promising her the house, the rental income, a future. And I thought you should know what's coming before it hits. We talked for over an hour. She told me her story, and it was like listening to my own life narrated by someone else. The isolation, the financial manipulation, the gaslighting, the way he'd convinced her she was crazy for questioning him, that she was ungrateful, that she was the problem. He left me with nothing, she said. I had to declare bankruptcy. Lost my house, my car, my credit was destroyed. It took me 8 years to recover financially, and I'm still not all the way back. I was 42 when we divorced. I'm 58 now. I lost 16 years of my life to him and another 8 cleaning up the mess he made. How did you finally leave? I asked. My sister, she said. She showed up one day, took one look at me and said, "You're coming home with me." I tried to argue, but she wouldn't hear it. She packed my bags, put me in her car, and drove me to her house 3 states away. Kept me there for 2 months while I got my head straight. If she hadn't done that, I don't know if I ever would have left. The isolation was so complete by then, I didn't think I had anywhere to go. I don't have a sister like that, I said quietly. Then be your own sister, Diane said. Be the person who rescues you, because nobody else is coming. I learned that the hard way. She gave me the name of her lawyer. She's good, she's tough, she won't let him steamroll you, and she's seen this pattern before. Call her, tomorrow, don't wait. I don't know if I can afford. She'll work with you, Diane said. Trust me, just call her. Her name is Ruth Blackwell. Tell her I sent you. She'll understand. After we hung up, I sat very still. The autumn light was slanting through the windows, making everything golden and soft, and I thought about how deceptive beauty could be, how you could look at something lovely and not see the rot underneath. I didn't cry. I'd done enough crying. Instead, I picked up the phone and called a lawyer. The attorney was a woman named Ruth, probably 60, with gray hair and sharp eyes. She listened to my whole story without interrupting, and when I finished, she said, "Okay, here's what we're going to do." First, we froze all joint accounts, every single one. He woke up the next morning to find his cards declined. Second, we filed for legal separation and immediate financial protection. Third, we put a lien on the house for my share of the equity. Fourth, we sent notice to his employer about potential garnishment of wages for debts he'd accrued in my name. I did all of this in 48 hours. Didn't tell him it was coming. Didn't give him a chance to hide anything else or spin another story. When he came home that Tuesday afternoon, I was sitting in the living room with the crocheted blanket across my lap, waiting. He walked in, and I could see on his face that he knew something was wrong. "What did you do?" he asked. "I protected myself," I said. He went from 0 to rage in seconds. Started yelling about betrayal, about how I'd ruined everything, about how he was going to make sure I ended up with nothing. All the things abusers say when they lose control. But I didn't engage. I just sat there, calm, and said, "I know about Jessica. I know about the money. I know about all of it, and I'm done." "You can't prove anything," he spat. "I don't need to prove anything," I said. "I just need to protect what's mine, and you're not getting another dollar from me." That's when he switched tactics. Got quiet, sat down, tried to look hurt. "I can't believe you don't trust me," he said. "After everything I've done for us, after all these years." It was almost funny. Almost. "Get out," I said. "This is my house too. Not anymore. You're going to leave, and you're going to figure out your own life, and you're going to stop using me to fund it." He stood up, towering over me, trying to use his size to intimidate like he'd done so many times before. But I didn't flinch. I just looked at him, this man I'd spent 32 years with, and saw him clearly for the first time. Not the person I'd married, not the person I'd built fantasies around, Just a man who'd been using me, who'd been counting on my loyalty and my fear to keep me trapped. "You'll regret this," he said. "You're nothing without me. You're going to lose everything." "I already lost everything," I said. "I lost it years ago. I'm just finally admitting it." He grabbed his keys, his wallet, his jacket, stood at the door for a moment like he expected me to call him back, to apologize, to break down and beg him to stay. When I didn't, when I just sat there wrapped in my grandmother's blanket watching him leave, something in his face changed. It was like a mask dropping. The hurt look disappeared, replaced by pure contempt. "You're going to die alone in this dump," he said. "Nobody's going to want you. You're 57 years old, and you have nothing to offer anyone." "Maybe," I said, "but at least I'll be free." He slammed the door hard enough to rattle the windows. He left. Went to stay with Jessica, I assume. Told everyone who'd listen that I'd lost my mind, that I'd kicked him out for no reason, that I was vindictive and crazy and trying to destroy him financially. Some people believed him. My sister-in-law called me, angry, saying I was tearing the family apart. My niece sent me a text saying she was disappointed in me. His brother stopped speaking to me entirely. They wanted me to be reasonable, to work it out, to remember all the good times. But I was done protecting his reputation at the expense of my reality. The woman who did believe me, who stood by me, was Diane, his ex-wife, the one he'd painted as bitter and greedy and impossible. We met for coffee one Saturday morning at that little diner on the edge of town, and she told me her whole story. It was identical to mine: the isolation, the financial manipulation, the other women, the blame. "He's going to try to come back," she said. "When Jessica figures out who he really is and leaves him, he'll come back to you. He'll apologize. He'll promise to change. Don't believe him." I nodded. "I won't." "Good," she said, "because you deserve better than being someone's safety net." We became friends after that. Real friends. It was strange and wonderful and healing in ways I didn't expect. She understood things nobody else could, and she never judged me for staying as long as I did because she'd done the same thing. Having her in my corner gave me strength for what came next. He contested everything, of course, hired a lawyer, claimed I'd mismanaged the properties, said he deserved half of everything because it was a marriage. His attorney tried to paint me as financially incompetent, someone who needed his guidance and management. Ruth tore that argument apart, with bank statements and property records and testimony from tenants who'd paid rent to me directly for years. She showed the court exactly where every dollar had gone and exactly how much he'd stolen. The judge was not sympathetic to him, but the real justice came from somewhere unexpected. His family, the ones who'd been so quick to defend him and condemn me, started hearing things. Jessica reached out to one of his cousins, asking questions about his first marriage, about money he owed, about promises he'd made. The cousin started digging, started asking around, started putting pieces together. They discovered he'd taken loans from his own mother, supposedly for our house, and never paid her back. They discovered he'd borrowed money from his brother for a business venture that never existed. They discovered he'd been lying to everyone, playing the victim, using family sympathy to fund his lifestyle. One by one, they stopped taking his calls. His mother told him not to come for Thanksgiving. His brother sent a formal letter demanding repayment. His cousins blocked him on social media. He was cut off, disowned, not by my choice, but by his own family's realization of who he really was. And Jessica? She left him 3 months after the baby was born, came to my house one afternoon with the infant in her arms and apologized. Said she'd been stupid, that she should have listened to the warnings, that she had nowhere else to go. I didn't let her move in, but I gave her Diane's number. Some cycles need to be broken by the people living them, not by the ones who've escaped. Through all of this, I kept working on myself, started going back to the library as a volunteer, picked up my paintbrushes again, went to my sister's house for Sunday dinners, started therapy, started rebuilding my credit and my finances. The library welcomed me back like I'd never left. Mrs. Chen, the head librarian who'd hired me 30 years ago, took one look at me that first day and pulled me into a hug. "We've missed you," she said. Just that. Simple and true. I volunteered in the children's section, reading stories to kids, helping them pick out books, and slowly, carefully, I started remembering who I'd been before I'd lost myself in that marriage. There was this one little girl, maybe 6 years old, who came in every Tuesday afternoon with her grandmother. She had pigtails and missing front teeth and the most infectious laugh I'd ever heard. She'd run straight to me, grab my hand, and pull me to the picture book section. "Miss Harrison, read me this one," she'd say, thrusting a book into my hands. And I would. I'd sit cross-legged on the floor with her and whatever other kids wandered over, and I'd read about dragons and princesses and adventures, doing all the voices, making them laugh. One Tuesday, her grandmother pulled me aside. "I don't know what you're doing," she said, "but my granddaughter talks about you all week. She practices reading at home so she can read to you. You're making a difference." I cried in the bathroom after they left. Because for so long, I'd been told I didn't matter, that I wasn't contributing anything meaningful, that I was a burden. And here was this child, this beautiful little girl, who lit up when she saw me, who thought I was important, who was learning to love books because of our time together. That's when I realized something crucial. I'd been living my life according to one person's assessment of my worth. One cruel, manipulative person who'd benefited from keeping me small and scared. But that wasn't the truth. That was never the truth. The painting came back slowly, too. I bought new brushes, new paints, new paper, set up my easel in the bedroom where I could see it every morning. The first few attempts were terrible. My hands had forgotten how to blend colors, how to control the water, how to make the brush do what I wanted. But I kept at it. I painted the view from my window, the old oak tree in the yard, the way light fell through the kitchen at dawn. Diane came over one Saturday and caught me in my makeshift studio, frustrated with a painting that wasn't turning out right. I'd been working on it for hours, and the colors were muddy, the composition was off, and I was about ready to tear it up. "What's wrong with it?" she asked. "Everything," I said. "It's terrible. I don't know why I thought I could do this again." She looked at the painting for a long moment. "You know what I see?" she said. "I see someone trying. I see someone who's brave enough to make something imperfect and keep going anyway. That's not terrible. That's beautiful. You're just being nice." "I'm really not," she said. "I'm being honest. You spent 3 decades with someone who criticized everything you did. Of course you're going to hear his voice in your head telling you you're not good enough, but that voice is a liar, and you get to choose whether you listen to it or not." She was right. I kept that muddy, imperfect painting, hung it in my kitchen, because it represented something more important than technical skill. It represented my refusal to give up, my determination to reclaim the parts of myself I'd lost. My sister cried when I showed up for Sunday dinner that first week. "I thought I'd lost you," she said, holding me tight. "I thought he'd taken you so far away I'd never get you back." Her kids, my nephews and nieces who'd grown up while I was isolated, were adults now with children of their own. I'd missed so much. Years of birthdays and graduations and weddings. But they welcomed me back without judgment, without questions. Just love. Therapy was harder than I expected. Sitting in that office week after week, having to say out loud all the things I'd been denying for decades, having to look at my own choices and understand how I'd stayed in something so destructive for so long. My therapist, Dr. Martinez, was patient but direct. The first few sessions, I spent most of the time defending him, explaining his behavior, making excuses. He had a difficult childhood, I'd say. He was under a lot of stress. I should have been more understanding. Dr. Martinez would just look at me with these steady, knowing eyes and wait. "Why do you think you need to protect him?" she asked one day. The question stopped me cold. "I'm not protecting him." "Aren't you?" she said gently. "Every time you explain away his cruelty, every time you take responsibility for his choices, you're protecting him from the consequences of his actions." Why? I didn't have an answer, not then. But over the following weeks, we unpacked it together. How I'd been taught that women are supposed to be peacemakers, that our job is to smooth things over, to make everyone comfortable, to absorb the pain so others don't have to feel it. How I'd been trained from childhood to put everyone else's needs before my own, to see selflessness as virtue and self-care as vanity. "You know what's selfish?" Dr. Martinez said one day. "Taking everything from someone and calling it love. That's selfish. Taking care of yourself? That's survival. That's wisdom. That's strength." We worked on boundaries. That was the hardest part. Learning to say no. Learning that I didn't owe explanations or justifications for my choices. Learning that I could disappoint people and it didn't make me a bad person. I practiced with small things first. A woman from church asked me to bake 6 dozen cookies for a fundraiser, and instead of automatically saying yes like I always had, I said, "I'm not able to do that." Just that. No long explanation about why I couldn't, no apologizing, no offering to do something else instead. Just a simple no. It felt revolutionary. It felt terrifying. It felt like freedom. "You're not responsible for what he did," Dr. Martinez would say, "but you are responsible for what you do now, for how you heal, for the boundaries you set, for choosing yourself." Choosing myself. That concept was so foreign it felt like learning a new language. There were setbacks. Days when I'd wake up and think maybe I'd been too harsh, maybe I should have tried harder, maybe I'd destroyed a marriage that could have been saved. Those days were dark. I'd sit at my kitchen table and cry, wondering if I'd made a terrible mistake. But then I'd look at my bank statements, at the rental income that was finally going where it should, at the debts I was slowly paying off, at the life I was rebuilding, brick by brick, and I'd remember, I hadn't destroyed this marriage. He had. Years ago. I was just finally admitting it. Ruth helped me refinance the house in just my name. The rental income was finally going where it should have been all along, to me. I paid off the home equity loan in 2 years, working extra hours, living frugally, focused on one goal: freedom. I took on extra cleaning work for the apartments, did repairs myself when I could, learning skills I'd never thought I'd need. YouTube became my teacher. How to fix a leaky faucet, how to patch drywall, how to replace a light fixture. My hands got calloused, my back ached, but every dollar I earned was mine. Every debt I paid off was one less chain holding me down. The IRS lien was the hardest to deal with. I set up a payment plan, worked with a tax attorney Ruth recommended, and slowly, month by month, chipped away at that $48,000 debt that I hadn't even known existed. It took 4 years. 4 long years of living as frugally as possible, of watching every penny, of working harder than I'd ever worked. But I did it. I paid it off. And when the lien was released, when the title to my mother's house was finally clear, I sat in the county clerk's office holding that document and cried. Not from sadness, from relief, from pride, from the knowledge that I'd saved the one thing my mother had wanted me to have. And I found the farmhouse. It was 40 minutes outside Cleveland, down a winding road that turned to gravel, set back in the trees with 10 acres of land. Old place, needed work, but solid, real. It had a garden area grown over with weeds, a chicken coop that hadn't housed chickens in decades, and a porch that wrapped around 3 sides where you could sit and watch the sunset without hearing traffic. I found it by accident, really. I'd been driving around on a Sunday afternoon, no destination in mind, just driving, trying to imagine what my future could look like, what I wanted it to look like. And I turned down this gravel road, just exploring, and there it was. A faded for sale sign at the end of a long driveway, barely visible through the overgrown bushes. I pulled in. The house was white clapboard, paint peeling, shutters hanging crooked. The porch sagged a little on one side. The yard was overgrown with wildflowers and tall grass. It should have looked depressing. It should have looked like too much work, but it looked like possibility. I called the number on the sign. The owner was an elderly man whose wife had passed away, and he couldn't keep up with the property anymore. He was moving to live with his daughter in Arizona. He told me the price, and it was less than I'd expected, much less. The place needs work, he warned. Haven't kept up with it the way I should have. But the bones are good, solid foundation, good well. The land is cleared and ready for planting if you want. My wife, she had gardens all over, tomatoes, peppers, herbs, chickens too, 3 or 4 dozen of them. She loved those birds. His voice cracked a little when he talked about her, and I thought about love, real love. The kind where you remember your partner's gardens and chickens with tenderness decades later. The kind I'd never had. I went to see the property the next day. Walked through the house, which smelled like dust and old wood and memories. 4 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen with ancient appliances, and a farmhouse sink deep enough to bathe a baby in. Hardwood floors under the stained carpet. Big windows in every room. The owner walked me through, pointing out what needed fixing, being honest about the flaws. The roof was good. The plumbing worked but was old. The electrical was outdated but functional. The heating system chugged along but should probably be replaced soon. "Why are you selling so cheap?" I asked him. He looked at me for a long moment. "My daughter says I should list it for more, wait for the right buyer, but I don't want to wait. I want this place to go to someone who'll love it the way my Martha did. And you," he paused, "you got that look." "What look?" "Like you need a fresh start," he said simply. "Like you're ready to build something new. Am I right?" I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. "Then it's yours if you want it," he said. "Fair price, no games, just one condition." "What's that?" "You get chickens," he said. "Martha would want that." I laughed through tears and shook his hand. I bought it for cash, sold the apartments in the city to a developer for a good price, kept enough to live on, and bought the farmhouse outright. No mortgage, no debt. Just me and the land and the quiet. Moving day, I took that crocheted blanket my grandmother made and folded it carefully into a box, not leaving it behind, but not giving it the same place of honor anymore either. It was part of my history, but it didn't define my future. The farmhouse has become my sanctuary. I painted the bedroom walls a soft yellow. I set up a studio in what used to be a sun porch, with all my art supplies organized and ready. I planted tomatoes and herbs and sunflowers. I got 3 chickens who make me laugh every morning with their antics. I have friends over for dinner and actually cook from those recipes I collected for years. The chickens came first, 3 Rhode Island Reds from a farm down the road. I named them Harriet, Ruth, and Diane, after the 3 women who'd saved my life. They strutted around the yard like they owned the place, pecking at bugs, taking dust baths, squabbling over the best perch in their coop. Every morning I'd go out with scraps from the kitchen, and they'd come running, wings flapping, making those ridiculous chicken noises that never failed to make me smile. The first time I collected eggs from their nesting boxes, I stood in the coop holding 3 warm brown eggs in my hands and cried. Not sad tears, grateful tears, because these were mine. I'd earned them. Nobody could take them from me or tell me I didn't deserve them or claim credit for them. They were the literal fruits of my labor, my new life, my freedom. I learned to bake bread, real bread, from scratch with flour and water and yeast and thyme. The first loaf was dense and heavy, more like a brick than bread. But it was mine. I'd made it with my own hands, in my own kitchen, in my own time. I ate it anyway, toasted with butter, and it was the most delicious thing I'd ever tasted. The garden became my therapy. I spent hours out there, hands in the dirt, pulling weeds, planting seeds, watching things grow. Tomatoes that actually tasted like tomatoes. Basil that smelled like summer. Zucchini that grew faster than I could harvest it. I gave bags of vegetables to my neighbors, to Diane, to Mrs. Chen at the library. People started calling me the farm lady, and I wore that title with pride. I hosted my first dinner party in late summer. Diane, Ruth, my sister, and her family, Mrs. Chen and her husband, some friends from the library and the domestic abuse center. 14 people around my dining room table, eating food I'd cooked from recipes I'd been collecting for decades. The table was crowded, the conversation was loud, and at one point, I stood in the kitchen doorway just watching them all talk and laugh and eat, and I thought, this is what life is supposed to feel like. My sister found me there and put her arm around my waist. "You did it," she whispered. "You really did it." "I almost didn't," I said. "But you did," she insisted. "You saved yourself, and I'm so proud of you." Some days I wake up and can't believe this is my life, that I'm free, that I made it out. I wake up to roosters crowing. My chickens somehow convince themselves they're roosters, and sunlight streaming through yellow curtains. I make coffee in my own kitchen, at my own pace. I sit on my porch and watch the morning mist lift off the fields. I decide what I want to do with my day, and then I do it. No one criticizes. No one demeans. No one takes. It's quiet here, not the oppressive silence of walking on eggshells, of being afraid to speak. The good quiet, the peaceful quiet, the kind where you can hear yourself think and actually like what you're hearing. Other days are harder. I think about all the years I lost. I think about the woman I could have been if I'd left sooner, if I'd trusted myself more, if I'd recognized the abuse for what it was instead of calling it loyalty and sacrifice. But mostly, I'm at peace, because I did the hardest thing I've ever done, and I survived it, and I'm building something beautiful from the wreckage. 6 months after I moved to the farmhouse, he showed up, drove up in that Cadillac Escalade, the midnight black one I'd helped pay for without ever sitting in it. Knocked on my door like he had a right to be there. I didn't let him in. Stood on the porch and listened to his apologies, his excuses, his promises to change. He looked smaller somehow, older, tired. "I need another chance," he said. "I made mistakes, but I love you. I always have." I looked at him for a long moment, this man I'd spent 32 years with, and felt nothing but pity, not love, not hate, just pity. "No," I said, simple as that. "You're really going to throw away our whole marriage?" "You threw it away," I said, "years ago. I'm just finally accepting it." He left. Hasn't come back since. I'm 58 years old, and I'm starting over. Most people my age are thinking about retirement, about grandkids, about slowing down. I'm thinking about what I want to do with the rest of my life now that it's actually mine again. I'm taking classes in watercolor technique. I'm volunteering with a literacy program. I'm helping other women at a domestic abuse center, sharing my story, showing them the financial red flags I missed for so long. I'm living. And I've learned something important, something I wish I'd known decades ago. Isolation is a tactic. When someone systematically separates you from friends, from family, from your own dreams and identity, that's not love. That's control. And it's so insidious because it happens gradually, one small cut at a time, until you wake up one day and realize you're completely alone and dependent on the person who's hurting you. I learned that I wasn't alone in this experience. A 2014 study showed that almost 4 in 10 seniors have experienced verbal abuse. 4 in 10.
And studies show that 1 in 10 seniors experiences some form of abuse every year. 1 in 10. Most of us stay quiet, thinking we're too old to start over, thinking nobody will believe us, thinking we somehow deserve it or caused it. But we don't. Nobody deserves to be diminished and controlled and robbed of their dignity and their future. If you're reading this and recognizing yourself in my story, please hear me. It's not too late. It's never too late to choose yourself. It's never too late to do the math, face the truth, and take action to protect what's yours. You don't owe anyone your suffering. You don't owe anyone loyalty at the expense of your well-being. You don't have to stay in situations that are killing you slowly just because you've already invested years or because other people won't understand. Your life is yours. Take it back. I'm sitting on my farmhouse porch right now, watching the sun set over the fields, and I'm wearing my turquoise blouse. Not because it's a special day, because every day I wake up free is special. Because I made it out. Because I chose me. And you can too. Have you lived something like this? Do you know someone who has? Drop a comment below. Your story matters. Your voice matters. And if this resonated with you, please like and subscribe. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Because somewhere out there is a woman sitting by a phone that never rings, believing the lies, counting the cost, wondering if it's too late. Tell her it's not. Tell her I made it. Tell her she can too.